Remember this portion of the story of God as it is written in the book that we love. Portions from 1 Samuel chapter 17. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. And David rose up early in the morning, left the sheep with a keeper, and took and went as Jesse had commanded him. And as he came to the trench, as the host was going forth to fight, he shouted for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. And David left the carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage and ran into the army and came and saluted his brethren. And behold, as he spoke with them, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and stood and cried unto the armies of Israel, saying, Why have ye come out to set your battle in array? Am not I a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose for you a man to come down to me. If he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him, then he shall be our servants and serve us. And the Philistine cried, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. And when all the men of Israel heard him, they fled from him and were sore afraid. And they said, Have ye seen this man that is come up? Surely to defy Israel he has come up. And it shall be. It shall be that the man that killeth him, the king will enrich with great riches, and give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. And David spoke to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth him, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him after this manner, saying, So shall be done to the man that killeth him. And Eliab, David's eldest brother, heard the words which David spoke. And his anger was kindled against him. And he said, Why hast thou come down hither? With whom have thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride, and the naughtiness of thine heart. Thou hast come down that thou might see at the battle. And David said to him, What have I done now? Is there not a cause? And David turned from him toward another and spoke after the same manner, and the people answered him in the same manner. And when they heard the words which David spoke, they rehearsed them before Saul. And he sent for him. And David said unto Saul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, Thou art not able to go and fight with this Philistine, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And David said unto Saul, Thy servant kept his father's sheep. And there came a lion and a bear, and took one of the flock. And thy servant went out after him and delivered him out of the mouth of the lion and the bear. And when he rose up against me, I grabbed him by the beard, and I smote him and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. And David said moreover, Look, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this uncircumcised Philistine. And Saul said unto David, Whoo! and the Lord be with thee. And Saul armed David with his armor, and put a helmet of brass upon his head, and armed him with a coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon his armor, and essayed to go, for he had not proved them. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off him, and took his staff in his hand, and chose 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag which he had, even in a scrip. And a sling was in his hand. And David drew nigh to the Philistine. And the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David. The man that bare the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, and of a fair countenance. And the Philistine said, Am I a dog, that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the field. And David said unto the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. And this day he will deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee, and I will take thine head from thee. And I will give the carcasses of the Philistines this day, and to the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the earth, that all this earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the battle is the Lord's, and he will deliver thee into our hand. And it came to pass that the Philistine came and arose and drew nigh to meet David, that David hastened and put his hand in his bag and took thence a stone and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. So he ran, stood upon the champion, drew his sword from his sheath thereof, and cut off his head therewith. When all the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled.